Welcome viewers to another very special episode of Your Britain. Yes, Your Britain, every Monday 5 p.m. UK time, only on Kanshi TV, your number one entertainment channel right across the globe. We are broadcasting to over 180 countries with millions of viewers watching this program, one of the highly rated programs here in the UK and of course around the globe. And as you know, if you're regular viewers of this program, we discuss issues which are reflecting and affecting all our communities here in the UK and right across the globe. And for that reason, we have special guests in the studio with us on every Monday at 5 p.m. And let me remind you, repeat program will be at Friday 2 p.m. So if you've missed this program, not to worry, you can see us on YouTube, you can see us on Facebook and many other media channels which Kanshi TV is broadcasting on. And also, let me remind you of the repeat program once again, Friday 2 p.m. You can watch this same program again. And one other thing which is very important is our new studio live number has been changed to 08000, that's 08000886404, I believe is the new studio number. So this is a live program. If you want to call us, you've got any questions for myself or for the guest, by all means, you can call us live here in the studio and we'll try our best to answer your questions. Tonight we'll be talking about a very particular subject which many of you are very well aware of. In the next coming 6 to 8 weeks, we have the elections taking place here in the West Midlands. I'm referring to the police commissioner elections which are taking place, the PCC elections. So police commissioner elections, which many of you know that we have to select a police commissioner who controls the whole of West Midlands, and you have the police force working under the police commissioner, under his guidance and under his obstructions. So basically today we have a particular candidate who is standing for a political party, and let me remind our viewers that this is going to be this program will be also introducing two other candidates in the next couple of weeks or so. We've got the Liberal Democrat candidate with us here today. Next week we'll have the Labour Party candidate, and then finally we've got the Conservative Party candidate who will be here. All these men are fighting to stand for this position for the police commissioner elections which are taking place in May 2021. But just before I do that, let me draw your attention to some of the stats and figures which I have. According to the Express and Star, this is going back in July 2020, West Midlands knife crime rate. Okay, this is the second highest in the country. London is first, and then you've got the West Midlands. Nearly 3,500 offences of knife crime have taken place. And let me remind my viewers as well, just approximately 16 months ago, I also interviewed David Jameson, who's the police commissioner for the West Midlands, and at that particular point there was a very serious issue about children taking knives in schools. We had 13, 14, 15-year-old children who were taking knives in schools, in secondary schools, and he was here in the studio with me where we discussed many issues. However, whether any action has been taken by the police commissioner or by the West Midlands police force, you are the judges of that, you will decide that. But let me remind you that I have done a program with the police commissioner approximately 16 months ago, who's been in power approximately for 2 terms. Now, as I said, the elections are coming, so all the candidates are trying to outright each other by stating that if they get elected, they will do X, Y, Z for all our communities. So let me take you back to the figures again. 3,500 offences according to Express and Star going back in 2020, July 2020, and West Midlands was the second highest in the country. Let me also take you to the violent crime rates in Birmingham. Just in Birmingham, we've got 40% higher than the national average. So when we're talking about violent crime, I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about, is that 40% higher than the average national rate. That is a big increase. Let me also very briefly, just to give you some in-depth knowledge of what's going on and why should we elect these guys, why should we support these guys, why should we support these police commissioners if these are the rates that we have got, if these are the stats and the figures. I mean, I've got tons and tons of stats and figures, but because of the time, I can't go through all of them. We only have approximately 55 minutes for this program. So I'm going to very briefly take you back to December 2020. Okay, I'm not taking you far back in years. I'm only taking you a couple of months back, approximately a year back, just under a year. ABS, we had, this is for the West Midlands, by the way, these figures that I'm giving you at this particular moment sorry, I beg your pardon, these are the UK stat figures for the crime stats in the UK. On average, I'm just giving you insight information and just a pinch of what's going on with these stats. ABS 3,982 incidents, burglaries 1,708, robberies 615, vehicle crimes 2,257. Shoplifting, we've got 982. Violence, 12,650. Then we've got drugs, 543. And here I'm talking about drugs on a high level drugs. I'm not talking about low level drugs where you have certain individuals operating very locally and in small amounts of drugs being supplied to each other. I'm talking about the main drug dealers who are dealing in millions of pounds of drugs, and the numbers are coming in for them is 543. Weapons 367. Public order 2,385. And there are many more. As I said, I've got a full list of these. In total, we had from December 2020's figures I'm giving you, 29,950 crimes, which is almost 30,000 crimes in approximately 6 to 7 to 8 months. Around that sort of figures I'm giving you the basic stats for. That's almost 30,000 crimes which have been committed in the UK. I mean, what more can I say? What more can I say, particular when it comes to knife crime and particular when it comes to violent crimes? And also, let me remind you, going to the Home Office figures, which have been recently, we've had some figures from the Home Office. This is going back in March 2020. Yes, March 2020. 18% is we're talking about West Midlands now. So 18%, we have Asian population of 18% in the West Midlands. And when we're talking about the police force, we are expecting approximately 5 in 1 police officers. So according to these figures, but we haven't got that. We, at the moment, we got 7.4% of the Asian population in the West Midlands, I believe. And here, we should be looking at least 1 in 12, approximately 1 in 12 officers should be employed or should be working for the police. So basically what we're trying to say, that the police, for whatever reason, either people are not joining the police, or the police is not recruiting more Asian or BAME, I would say BAME community rather than the Asian community, the BMA community. Police is not welcoming them on board. And even if they are, they get to the first stage, and the second, third, fourth stage, they eventually fail the process or the examinations or whatever tests which are required by the forces. So for that reason, I have a very special guest here in the studio with me. Let me take you straight to my guest, somebody who is a very familiar face here in Birmingham, particularly in the West Midlands, who is a local councillor for the Perry Bar ward here in Birmingham. He has been a councillor for many, many years, supporting all our communities and working for the best interest for all our communities. And this is one of the main reasons why he's been elected again and again. The one and only very respectable city councillor, Birmingham City Councillor John Hunt, who's also the candidate for the West Midlands Police Crime Commissioner. John Hunt, welcome to Your Britain and welcome to Kanshi TV.
Hello Shazad, and thank you very much indeed for having me on your show. I'm delighted to be here on a show with such a reputation for representing community issues and taking up community news. We're on Your Britain, I believe, Sky Channel 772. It's a privilege to be here, and let's have a very good discussion this afternoon about the future of policing.
John, first of all, thank you very much for coming onto my program. As I said, it's a pleasure to have you. As you've heard me in my introduction, the figures which I've briefly highlighted, there are many, many other stats and figures. We don't have the time to go through every single statement and every single stat. But generally speaking, I'm sure you get the drift of where I'm taking this program and what's happening in the West Midlands. People are absolutely fuming. People are upset. We've had police commissioners, approximately 2-3 terms, from the same political background, from the same political parties. I'm referring to the Labour Party at this particular particular moment, because the person who's in charge at this particular moment is David Jameson, who's the police crime commissioner. He's been a police commissioner, I believe, for 2 terms. Now the elections are taking place in May 2021. You're standing for this position to bring in change. That is one of your main reasons why you want to stand, is to bring in change and to make sure that you can cater for all other communities and support all other communities. That is one of the main reasons. But on the other hand, let me get this clear as well, that you also believe, these positions are a waste of money, they're a waste of time. We rather spend that amount of money directly within the force, so the force can support vulnerable people and people who really need the support, particularly when it comes to crimes. Now, people would generally think in their mind, well, John, if you're against the position, why are you standing for the position? You shouldn't be standing for the position. But the matter of fact is, you're standing for the position to make a change. You could only make a change once you're in that position. Then you have the full authority, the full control to make decisions, and I believe that's that's one of the reasons why you're going for this, alongside the reasons of supporting our local communities. So, John, in your own words, why are you standing for this position?
Yeah, and my first reason for standing is because as a local councillor in the last 20 years, I've seen good policing come and go. I've seen a period when we had good policing, we had very good local police teams working in every neighbourhood in the city and in the region, and they worked with the local population and they worked with the local community. Now, that's been taken away for several reasons. One is cutbacks in total policing numbers and budgets, but also because of some very short-sighted decisions that have been taken in recent years, and we'll come to those in a second, together with a lack of focus on some of the real problems and real issues that underlie this, which I think you've referred to. So when you look at it, I then conclude that my party says, quite rightly, that this office doesn't work. It's a failure. The post is meant to be somebody who represents the public in policing. We're not talking about electing somebody to run the police force. That's the job of the professional chief constable. We're talking about somebody who represents the public, holds the chief constable to account, and sets the budgets and negotiates those budgets with the chief constable. Now, that person currently sits in the police house in Lloyd House, with a large office costing £2.5 million a year. In other big cities, London and Manchester, they've done it differently, and they've made the post a deputy mayor alongside the regional mayor, and that seems to me to be a place where people would understand better what this post is for. I mean, everybody would understand we're not talking about somebody to run the police and to defend the police, but somebody to represent the public concerns and the public interests, at the same time as not spending £2.5 million a year on their own office.
So basically, you're standing to support the community, as you mentioned, to make sure that you can provide to the best of your ability if you are, God willing, elected in May 2021. But at the same time, I believe that you're also against this position. What are the main reasons that you believe that this position should be scrapped, the police crime commissioner position?
Well, firstly, it's failed.
Okay.
The police and crime commissioner should have been representing the public interest. The police and crime commissioner has primarily spent the time in the office defending the actions of the police.
Okay.
Now, there are some very good things in the local police. There's some good officers who work really hard for the community, and they have a very tough time and a very difficult time. And yet, because the public interest has been neglected, then some very basic mistakes have been made. And these local police teams that I referred to have effectively been dismantled. They're still there in name, but they travel long distances. They're based in huge police stations. They travel long distances to their communities. They don't have enough officers who understand their communities, who understand the local people to make them effective, knowing what's happening in that local community. And in several areas, in fact almost every area you talk about, you realise that police who are embedded in the local community and well respected in the local community make a huge difference to successful policing. Let
me just slightly move on. I mean, if you're elected, what do you believe are the key points in policing our communities? How can we improve them? So if you were elected in May, what difference, how would you work differently from what has been done so far in the last, 8 years or 10 years with the present
Yeah, and the good
police
news
commissioner.
is there are more police officers on the way. In the 2019 election, all the political parties promised more police officers, and the present government is delivering them. So several hundred being recruited every year, which means there's an opportunity to deploy police officers differently. And I'd expect at least 2 police officers in every local council ward extra going into local teams. On top of that, you have to look at the role of the police community support officers, who are terrific people. They're not fully trained police officers, but they're very good at working in their local communities. And as the police have pulled back from local communities, these officers have been left unsupported and very task orientated. They're given jobs to do, but they're not working in the community, not getting to know people, not helping to run youth clubs, for instance, not working with community organisations. And the numbers have been held back. Those numbers should be increased because it's a very good route into policing for a lot of people who are interested as well. West
Midlands Police, you know very well, have closed many local police stations. What's the reason for that?
Well, the
other than the obvious reason, which I've heard many times in my programs and many times in social media and other international news and national news, is that it's the funding.
Yeah, it's the money.
It's the money. But other than the money, is there anything else? Why have they shut these local police stations when at this particular time we need more officers, we need more officers patrolling in our streets, including
I think the problem's been they've been under funding pressure, and they've looked at the police stations and said each police station fetches about £1 million when they sell it. So that's the money's been the prime thing. You do wonder sometimes whether, because the police is very much a command and control structure, whether it suits the command and control to have officers more concentrated in fewer police stations. But it has been money, quite clearly. The problem's been it's been done in such haste and such rush that there's been no consideration as to what the implications are. And what I'm saying is that for every area and every community, we need a local policing plan which sets out how that local policing is going to be improved. Now, in other parts of the country, the police may not be working out of old-fashioned police stations, but they're working out of shops on high streets. They're going into council centres. They might have a base in a library or something like that. So it may be if the police station wasn't the appropriate place for them to be, the money from that police station could have gone into a more cost-effective base in that community, or even more bases in more communities, because there are many communities which didn't have a base in the first place. So, but it's been very short-sighted what's been done, because all that's happened, the police stations have closed and the officers have been pulled back into ever fewer stations, always spending a lot of their time every day travelling to where they're meant to be.
You see, John, many people would argue the point that there has been increase in council tax around the country, particularly in Birmingham. You're very well aware of that, up to, I don't know, maybe £80, £90, £100 per household in terms of increase in council tax. General taxes are always on the rise, and still we're having, and this is a prime need for our communities. The police force is something that we need in our communities, and still we're having police stations shut. Many people would say, well, I'm paying £80, £90 more. Why am I paying all these taxes when I need an officer at the time of an incident, emergency, or I need to go to a police station? The doors are shut, the shutters are down, the barriers are locked up. Where's my need?
And go back to where we started. That annual cost of £2.5 million for the Police and Crime Commissioner office. That's 2 police stations a year. So over 4 years, that's 8 police stations have been used to fund that office.
Do you then believe that these crimes are increasing because of that? Knife crime, for example, I've given you some stats.
I think it's a huge contributory factor, because one of the big answers to knife crime, and if you want to proceed and talk about knife crime, is to have police embedded in the communities. You referred to what was found 2 years ago, that the terrible thing, and I'm actually an immigrant to the West Midlands. I arrived in my 20s and lived in a flat above a shop in the Black Country when I first came. But I married into a local family, and I'm very well aware of the pressure there's been on young people in recent years. And this dreadful culture where young teenagers turned up at home and said, I've got to carry a knife because everybody else is, and they're saying it's the only way I'll keep safe, was appalling. And it was reflected in the loss of youth services. It was reflected in the police not being active in schools in their communities. It's also reflected in the fact that local police teams don't look like the communities they're trying to work with. You've got very few black officers in the police and a relatively low number of Asian police officers. I'm
coming straight onto the recruitment, but just before
it all links together, doesn't it?
It all links together. I've got everything lined up, John. Don't you worry about that. But just before I come to that point about recruitment, I was going to ask you, maybe people in other communities, particularly the Asian communities, are scared to join the force because of what they see on social media in terms of racism. Yes, I'm referring to racism. And viewers, let me remind you this. Just about approximately 2 months back, you seen a 14, 15-year-old child, is still a child at that age, a teenager who was pinned against a wall, John. He was pinned against a wall close to your ward that you represent, pinned against a wall and then beaten up by the police officer. That is just one incident I'm reporting at this particular moment. There are hundreds of incidents in West Midlands and thousands probably around the country going back, 4, 5, 6 years. But that is something which was splashed out on the media where people have seen the police officer, the way he treated that child. Other than that, we've seen police officers on social media. I'm not saying everything that is on social media is absolutely right or true, but we see many things on social media where police officers are deliberately provoking individuals, deliberately making racist remarks or trying to make racist remarks. The attitude, the character, the personality, the way they approach somebody, these all the body language, we see all these things happening within the force. And let me remind viewers, there are excellent police officers out there. West Midlands Force and the rest of the forces are doing a great job. Do not take that wrong in any sense. But there are always bad apples as well, and because of those bad apples, the whole force is discriminated, and people feel, especially the youngsters, especially the Asian community, feels that this place is not right for us. We don't see a future joining the forces right across the country.
Yeah, and there's a vicious circle there, isn't there?
Exactly.
Is if people from ethnic minorities don't join the police force, then the police force becomes even more alienated from the communities and even more lacking understanding of how these communities work. Is a terrible vicious circle which has to be broken. Now, I've worked with, I know, for instance, Asian police officers have been extremely good police officers and often found it very difficult working in the police force. And you see that right across the board. The level of disciplinary action against ethnic minority police officers is quite high. The police has got to deal with its culture, its historic culture in this respect. But also, once it starts to crack recruitment, it's got to start looking like the communities it serves. Now, I go back to the people who tried to pioneer change, because we've been here repeatedly in our region. We've had terrible riots, decade after decade, in our inner cities, and sometimes people have ended up or dead, basically. Shops have been burnt, we know that. We've had terrible riots, and we've had inquiries. And if you go back to the 1980s, 90s, remember Lord Scarman came in and conducted a very thorough inquiry and made quite a few recommendations. And prior to that, in that part of Birmingham, there was a fellow working called David Webb, who was pioneering what we call community policing. And his point was the officers, it was no good them simply patrolling the streets and looking down their noses at people, that they had to be out there with the community taking part. And what I'm saying now is the opportunities have been there to do that, but then they've gone. So particularly the police community support officers, who are not required to be involved in major investigations, are not trained to do that, had that superb opportunity to be doing that liaison, to be in the community and at community events, to be playing football with the young people, to be in the schools playing football with the young people. That's what recruits young people to the police, when they know friendly police officers who can explain to them why they could make a difference. Now those links have been broken, and you end up instead with, as you say, a few bad apples can poison the whole thing, and can really create antagonism between local communities and the police. A few bad apples on both sides, let's put it like that. A few criminals, it's in their interest too to poison the atmosphere. And you have to break that cycle. And we're not going to break the cycle until we have effective local policing and we have good recruitment of local people from within the region into the police.
Why do you feel so far it's been so poor?
I think it's been,
in terms of recruitment, I'm talking about.
I think it's been a lack of focus on it, because when I was preparing for this election, I'm on overtime here, because originally, if you remember, the election was meant to be last year. So I was looking back at the reports of the Police and Crime Commissioner, of the reports that were looked at, and there was absolutely no focus on this issue. It had been forgotten. And now, thanks to Black Lives Matters, is at the forefront, and efforts are being made, and targets have been set for the new recruitment, and let's hope they're successful. But part of that success is going to have to be breaking that cycle of suspicion that's been created when things have gone wrong.
You see, there's many new tactics the police want to use, particularly when it comes to the new technology, the face recognition, and money to the public, and so on. Right? I know at the moment they still have these chest cameras and so on. Some have cameras on their helmets, some have cameras just here on the pocket, and many other technical gadgets. Right? Do you support, or are you in favour of those new technologies, or do you believe the old traditional policing should be carried on with the old traditional system that we had before, where people are just approaching the individuals? Because according to our research and conduct production team, people feel intimidated when they see a police camera in front of them, and on top you have a police officer whose attitude is not 100%. They feel intimidated by talking to them. They feel that they feel under pressure, under threat by an officer. Do you believe that this new technology is causing more damage to our communities, or do you feel that it's absolutely fine to have constant recording, whether it's CCTV or whatever technology they're using?
Some technology is helpful. Some you have to be concerned about.
Right.
I'm sorry you mentioned about body cameras being intimidated to people, because they actually make a huge positive difference. There's a body cameras.
I mean, this is some of the information, research information.
All actions are evidenced and recorded, and and that means that it's very much harder for a police officer to go outside the rule book. It's much harder for a police officer to deliberately provoke somebody, to create a situation, to wrestle somebody, to use inappropriate methods of arrest, because the body cameras are recording it. So those, by and large, have been beneficial. Now, the other stuff about facial recognition, and you probably remember the row that there was nearly 20 years ago, it was 15 years ago, I think, Operation Paragon, that they tried to set up in Birmingham.
That's right,
and that was about finding terrorists, but the way it was done was awful. They planned to create a ring of cameras around central Birmingham, so they could detect everybody coming and going. And even with the technology available then, that was an awful project, and people were rightly castigated for it. The problem we have now is that more subtle technologies are coming on, which is the facial recognition stuff, where you can put your CCTV cameras out there, and they're very good at detecting car numbers. I think that's fine. I think if you go on the highway with a car, you're accountable for what you do. But the technology, the artificial intelligence technology is coming on, and they think it can detect faces. But so far, all the evidence is that artificial intelligence technology is proving racially biased.
You see, many people would also argue that Birmingham, being the second largest city in the UK, we've got London, we've got Birmingham, and it's a very multicultural city. We have people from all backgrounds in this city, from all cultures, from all races, who live and work in the city. Whereas if we compare this to, I don't know, Worcester or Warwick or somewhere, you may not have the same communities which are living in Birmingham or working in Birmingham. The rates there's a big difference in the rates in terms of crime. What's reasoning for that?
I mean, the underlying causes.
The underlying causes, the underlying causes.
Crime rates. That's a big question, isn't it? I mean, clearly some of it's linked to poverty, some of it's linked to the concentration of the city area, so that people are much closer to each other, so the opportunities to commit crime become easier for people who are criminal. Some of it's linked to criminal gangs finding it easier to hide in the city.
Okay.
So that's been one issue of gangs coming in and hiding, some gangs. Others of it linked is to criminal gangs just finding cities easier places to get their tentacles out into people, and they become self-sustaining, constantly recruiting young people. As I say, that cycle has to be broken, because I know, and as I said, I have good contacts in the region. I know that young people are being recruited at school by the gangs, and that cycle has to be broken. The gangs will, firstly they'll recruit, secondly they'll intimidate those who are interested in going into the police or going in the other direction. They'll ruin young people's life chances. It's critical for both, not just for policing, but for everything, for our society, that young people are not dragged into this criminality. And that can only be done by close working in partnership with the schools, the colleges, restoring the youth clubs, a big focus, because there is grant funding available through the police. There needs to be a big focus on getting those into effective youth clubs, which are well linked to their local police teams.
Do you believe it's our own communities to blame for this, in terms of the crimes, in terms of not educating our families, our children? Do you believe it's the parents who are sometimes not taking so much notice in terms of stopping crimes within inner cities of the UK? I'm talking about Birmingham, Manchester, Bradford, I don't know, Lancashire, places like them, where I've just given you example of Warwick, Worcester, Shropshire, some parts of Sutton. There's a huge difference. There's a big difference. Do you believe it's the lack of understanding within communities, and there's lack of teachings within communities, within the family circle?
I think that's a very, very profound question, and I would not like to say that. I think we have huge problems of family breakdown in the urban area. And in my career as a councillor, I mean, I've been involved in several areas that relate to this. I was involved quite closely for a period with children's services, where you were monitoring what happened to young people who ended up in council care, who are very, very vulnerable because they don't have stable homes. They're very isolated in themselves. Similarly, I was involved in quite a lot of work around religious education in schools, and we developed a very good curriculum for RE in schools, which is based on not just teaching children and young people about religions, but helping them to learn from their family faith what good values were and what good conduct was. That's a really good curriculum, a bit undermined in recent years by people neglecting it and not keeping it at the forefront. But I do think it's families and the education system has the opportunity to teach young people and children good, strong values.
Another question we have from one of our viewers. We have many questions. It's going to be difficult for me to go through every single one. I'm just pinpointing and picking out the important ones. That's no disrespect to anybody, otherwise we'll be here all night, and we only have 15-20 minutes approximately. So a question we have from a viewer in the name of Yasmin. She said, could you ask the candidate, in inner cities, particularly when it comes to children, the main issue at this particular moment is knife crime, which I mentioned in the introduction, and I've had the police commissioner discussing this issue when last year and a half ago, there was a serious issue of young children taking knives in schools, in their bags and so on. Nothing has been done about that, John. I haven't heard anything, any action that has been taken against that. If I'm wrong, please do correct me. I'm sure many people are listening, but if there has been anything that the police commissioner has done, particularly in the last 16 months, in terms of resolving this issue, I would love to hear from the police commissioner or from his team. But as far as my understanding is concerned, and I can be wrong, but as far as my understanding is concerned, at that time, I recommended this to the police commissioner, maybe just the way you see the nightclubs. When you go into a nightclub, you have the
screening.
Yeah, the screening, the metal detectors. So why can't we, and that's not a big investment. That is not, maybe a few million just to cover the whole of Birmingham or the whole of West Midlands. So it's not a very big investment. But if we can have, I'm referring to secondary schools at this moment, because that's where the trouble starts from, particularly with kids. If we can have those detectors, so as soon as a child walks in school in the morning, he knows, she knows, there's no way I can get away with this. I will have to walk through that barrier.
Yeah. Well, hello Yasmin, thank you for that really important question, and we talked about some of it already, but Shazad has raised the question of metal detectors, and I think that's possibly part of the answer in schools. The problem you have is when you're dealing with teenagers, they're not going to nightclubs, they're out on the streets, they're hanging around in different homes, and the incidents happen out on the streets. So it goes back to breaking that culture. And I said, I'm very well aware from my own contacts of the way that young people, teenagers, all of a sudden felt they had to carry knives. It was awful. It's been awful. And then we see the incidents that arise out of that.
Inside school, I'm referring to, John, in classrooms where children have knives inside the classrooms.
Now, there's several things, and I'm not going to speak for the Commissioner. The Commissioner can speak for himself.
Of course.
Your views. What I was involved in promoting about 18 months ago, we in our council group were first there, and we promoted it in Birmingham City Council, and it's now happening. And this is the bleed control kits.
Okay.
Now the two things about these are first aid kits. So when people know how to use them, they save lives. But the second thing is, if you teach about them in schools, you teach the young people what a knife injury actually is. And a knife injury is horrific. Young people carrying knives may think, well, a knife, it's just a flick. It's just going to be a scratch. It's just going to be a bit of pain. No, once the knife penetrates the body, it's horrible. And the doctors will tell you that a lethal knife attack is the worst kind to treat, because they cannot find, it's very difficult for them to track where that knife has gone through the body. So it's very difficult for them to repair it and treat it, which is why it's so lethal and so fatal. And the young people can and should be taught this in schools. There's been some progress with the bleed kits in the last 18 months, but again, along with everything else, it's about embedding within the schools, the colleges, the youth clubs, the culture of dealing with this pernicious problem. So maybe your screening devices, certainly the bleed control teaching, but also that community policing, where the police are seen to be part of the community, and they're there and can explain to the young people just how dangerous it is to carry knives. It's dangerous for other people, it's dangerous for you if you get attacked, and it's dangerous for your life and your career, because if you get caught with a knife in the wrong place, it's going to ruin your life, and that needs to be understood as well.
John, I've got a couple of more questions, very important, from Ali and also from Rihanna, but just before I do that, let me draw your attention to domestic abuse. I know due to COVID these cases have gone up now. Of course, for the last 12 months or so, people have been locked up inside the house, and obviously the rates are more higher than what they should have been, generally speaking. Domestic abuse works in both ways. You can have males or females. You can have males who are domestic abuse victims, and you can have females who are domestic abuse victims. Also, the London protest, which we've heard on the news, is the breaking news, is the story of the day on all channels at this particular moment, where we've lost that awful life of Sarah, a young lady. Have sympathy with the families, and we are fully standing with the family, shoulder to shoulder, on this awful incident which has taken place in London. But very briefly, the land of the law applies to everybody, and this is your own opinion and your own view on this. Of course, we've seen the protest taking place, and we've had 3 or 4 people who are trying to breach the COVID rules and regulations on this issue. What would you say about people who are deliberately causing this sort of nuisance within the communities? And again, I've made this point very clear that we pay our sympathies, we pay our respects to Sarah and the family, but at the end of the day, we're living in a civilized country, law-abiding country, where we have to abide the rules, the regulations and the law. Otherwise, today it can be one protest taking place here, and tomorrow it can be another protest taking place, and then on top of the COVID situation, we'll be breaching more laws. So there would be no point of having any guidance or laws on COVID if people decide to take the law in their own hands. What would you say about that?
Well, let's go back to the domestic abuse first of all.
Yeah, and then you can link that up.
Where you started the question, because dealing with domestic abuse has improved enormously in recent years, but a lot of it is about the victims having confidence it's worth their while going to the police, and that they will be treated well and fairly and genuinely and kindly. Now that comes to the issue of the relationship between the police and women, and you wouldn't expect to be having to talk about this, but all of a sudden it's blown up big time because the issue of Sarah Everard highlighted, and it went national. It went viral. It went viral and national because I think a lot of women have been feeling unsafe on the streets. So that vigil in Clapham was intended to demonstrate what women felt about their safety. Now, I've been a great proponent during lockdown of the police enforcing it properly. People have not been safe because it hasn't been enforced on buses. People have not been safe because events have been held and they've been too crowded and they haven't been managed well. Now, I don't know whether it would have been better for events to have been held throughout with proper social distancing, but I've heard of rallies taking place. People turn up, they're keeping social distancing, then all of a sudden they're marching off and they're shoulder to shoulder.
Correct.
And then out of that you see infection rates climb and soar, and you can make the links. It was obvious in America during the American election, wasn't it, when President Trump held those big rallies, and there were outbreaks in many of those areas. So holding close to close rallies and events is dangerous. The problem you had on Saturday night was it was spontaneous. There was a request to have an official event. It was refused, so women turned up anyway. Now, so it wasn't that somebody had organised an event and held it unofficially. It was that women turned up anyway. And the pictures we had of the police handcuffing women, taking them to the ground, was a very bad look for the police at a time when they're trying to build confidence in women that they will keep them safe on the streets and keep them safe in their homes. That's what's gone wrong there. It's not that, I mean, there may have been agitators there stirring things up. For all we know, agitators turn up at any large event. It was unfortunate and it went wrong, and it's a really, really bad look for the police. Which is why the Liberal Democrat leader Ed Davey has asked for the Police and Crime Commission to consider our position, because we don't know. No, actually, the Chief Constable in London, they don't have a PCC. They have a Deputy Mayor who's not been seen or heard of in the last few days, is hiding. Which is an interesting example of how these roles work, because the Chief Constable runs the police, and then there should be a public representative who's accountable too. So it was mishandled, and the problem is that's been a really bad look for women in police, and again we see the police getting alienated from a section of the community who they need to be helping and supporting. Okay, we have approximately 7 minutes according to my clock, and we have 4 questions, so we're going to go with the first one, and this is from Mr. Khan. If you were elected, how would you engage with all the communities? Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Khan, for that question, which I was on the brink of getting there just now, and then we moved on to another topic. If you go back to that Scarman report in the 80s, they set up area consultative committees for the police. And I used to attend some of those when I was first elected as councillor. And those meetings, you'd have local councillors, you'd have local police officers, you'd have community representatives of the community groups, and you'd have representatives of the police authority. And they disappeared. They've gone. I think there's some things are held in some way, but I'm not sure the Police and Crime Commissioner has been very active in going around in forums like that. And actually those forums need to be regular, so people have confidence, not just that they'll be summoned when somebody wants to speak to them, but that somebody will come and listen to them routinely about their concerns. Now, the Police and Crime Commissioner, it's 2 million people in the region. The Police and Crime Commissioner can't go to every community meeting. But these were area meetings, which were just about right. And I remember the chair of the Police Authority, who preceded the Police and Crime Commissioner and didn't get paid nearly as much as the Police and Crime Commissioner, being at those meetings and being able to be talked to. And that's what I would expect to be doing. Get those back and be there. And I'd expect to spend a lot of my time at those kind of events listening to people.
Mr. Ali, thank you very much for your text message. We've got many callers on the phone, but obviously we only got a few minutes, and believe you me, if we start taking calls, John, we would have never gone through all these questions. It would have, it's very difficult. We didn't have to fit everything in. But let me divert your attention to Mr. Ali's question. If you're elected, Mr. Hunt, the difference you will make.
Thank you,
on a personal level.
Thank you, Mr. Ali, for that question, which sums up what we're trying to say, doesn't it?
Yeah. What's the difference that you will make?
So the difference I will make in policing is to have an emphasis and an understanding of how we can get local policing work. We've got to halt the programme of police station closures, and we've got to have a local plan in every community to improve policing. That involves bringing in the local council. As I said, it may mean finding bases not in police stations but in libraries, on high streets for the local police. It means ensuring that as new police officers come into the force, they are based in those local police teams. They're seen in the community. It means ensuring that that recruitment and that target for ethnic minority recruitment is successful. And once you set a target, you can hold the Chief Constable to it, who I think is a man of great virtue and character, but he has to deliver.
Very swiftly moving on to our question from Rihanna, and she said, what are your priorities? What's your priority number one? I believe you me, John Hunt has got many priorities, but she wants to know what's going to be your number one priority if you are, God willing, elected in May 2021.
Thank you, Rihanna. And just to reinforce my point, my priority is to make local policing work, to get the police into our communities, representative of our communities, based in our communities, working with our communities, and working with young people and people of all ages to make it work and to make our communities safe.
John, I've got a few more questions, but I've only got 2 minutes, and I would love to take all these questions, but unfortunately, viewers, I do apologize. My producer is reminded me that we just have approximately 2 or 3 minutes to end the program. But just before I do that, I have a final question for you, and then your final message, John. Why should people vote for you in May 2021? Why should they vote for you?
Because I have the experience and the knowledge, and I also have the experience and the depth to make it happen. I've held senior positions in the West Midlands. I was Vice Chair of the West Midlands Transport Authority, so I ranged across the region. We need to make these changes happen. It's no good just talking about them. I think everybody's going to talk about community policing now, but I've actually worked with it for 20 years. I've seen it be good and I've seen it be bad, and I know how to make it happen, and that will be my objective. Your final message, who are watching us now, and as I said, millions of viewers are watching us right across the globe, in the UK, 180 countries, thousands and thousands, millions and millions of viewers watching Kanshi TV, particularly Your Britain, which is one of the highly rated programs which is being broadcasted here on Kanshi TV. Your final message to all our communities
You have approximately a minute.
Thank you, Shazad, and it's a wonderful opportunity to speak to you all about better policing. And I'm here standing, whether I win or not, to improve policing in the West Midlands and across the board as well, because I believe passionately that policing can be good. I've seen it be good. I've seen people with good ideas. We've lost that in recent years for various reasons. There's been a loss of emphasis. We need to bring it back and bring back good policing that serves our communities, keeps our communities safe, keeps our young people safe, and gives us all a safe future in our cities.
Councillor John Hunt, and also candidate for the West Midlands Police Crime Commissioner, thank you very much for coming on to Your Britain. Thank you very much for coming on to Kanshi TV, Sky Channel 772. Many thanks, sir. I wish you all the best in May, and I hope things do fall your way. And once, if you are elected, you will keep to your promises. Believe me, people will refer back to this program of all the statements that you have made this evening, and I'm sure they'll be holding you to account. But on the other hand, I'm sure that the promises that you've made and your statements, you will hold on to them as well and make sure that you support all our communities if you're elected in May 2021. Thank you very much once again. Many thanks.
Thank you, Shazad.
Viewers, there you go. That was John Hunt, a city councillor, a sitting city councillor here for Birmingham City Council, who's going to be taking part in the West Midlands Police Crime Commissioner elections taking place in May 2021. You've heard John's views, opinions on everything, and I have basically questioned him as much as I possibly can in terms of questioning him on different topics and different subjects within the police force and within the elections taking place. But again, I felt it was very important to also highlight issues like racism, issues like the protest which has taken place today, sorry, on Saturday, and many other issues about the stats and figures which I presented in my introduction. And I think John, to the best of his ability, answered all his questions. So I wish you once again all the best in the coming future, particularly for this election. Your Britain, every Monday 5 p.m. UK time, where we discuss issues affecting and reflecting all our communities here and right across the globe. And also don't forget to watch the repeat 2 p.m. Friday. And let me also mention this to you, John Hunt belongs to the Liberal Democrat. We also have the Police Crime Commissioner candidate for the Labour Party, for the Green Party, and for the Conservative Party, who will be on this programme in Your Britain in the next coming week. So you can see all this. Keep watching Your Britain, keep watching Kanshi TV. Love, peace, respect for each and every one of you. See you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.